segment 2 of the SARTopo session about mission planning. There's a lot of material in here and a lot of kind of best practices concepts. And I did want to mention up front that we worked with a lot of people around the state, including Nevada County, to put together kind of a best practices document that captures a lot of the protocols for using SARTopo and how we label things and so forth. And we'll make that available to everyone inside the class documents folder. So with that, let's roll. Part 2 goals tonight. We're going to talk about best practices in mission planning, collaboration options when doing plans, how to write effective plans, drawing clean and smart search areas. I've already kind of touched on that in terms of using Snap2 and such, but I really want to talk about how to visualize a good search area. And ordinarily, this would come after part of Matt's presentation, so it'll be a little bit out of sequence, but I think these examples will all stand on their own pretty well. I want to talk about bulk operations a lot in there. I'm sure some of you have used bulk operations, but I want to make sure everyone's aware of all the capabilities of that. And we'll have a big search plan that we can run some examples on. I'm going to talk a little about creating effective map packages, and then how to send people out on assignment forms. Our old 104 forms versus the new 104 summary or brief form that we spent a lot of time developing over the last few years, and it's hopefully becoming a standard. And I want to talk about why we do it that way and help people understand at least the process we went through in arriving at that. So with that, I'm going to start a new SARTopo session. I'm just going to go through a couple of examples, but I want to just talk about how you get started building a search. I think a lot of you are comfortable with that. For those that aren't, I just want to briefly run through that and make sure everyone is aware of that. A couple of things to do when you start a search is you have to add a marker or something onto the map itself, and then you can save the map. One of the things I did want to touch on is we always name our searches with a geographical mission name. We do not like to put the missing person's name on the search. There are a lot of sensitivities with that at times. And in fact, the search we had yesterday, the family would not even let us put the missing person's name on the missing person poster. So anyway, that was a pretty extreme case. But once you're done with that, you share it to your team account and all. But I did want to point out a couple of things. I did mention this briefly at the end of our last session, but if you check this box after you've created your map, you can kind of pre-select the layers that people are going to see when they either open the mobile app or another desktop app. So that can be a handy feature. And then down below, I wanted to mention the red X. Once you've created some sharing codes, which I showed you on the last session, after you've created those sharing codes, you can, once you finish your search, let's say, you can deactivate those so people can't go in and mess with your archive of your search plan. So you can just hit that red X and wipe certain things out. So that's pretty convenient. So with that, let me just demo this briefly. I'm going to go into a separate share real quickly. And I'm going to go to a Chrome page and should all see SARTopo now. So just to demo that real quickly, I'm going to put a command post on this map, new marker. I'm going to select the command post symbol. And I did want to mention, Matt just put in this week, and we're pushing hard on this new evacuation symbols since they don't really exist in any other symbol set. So if people are interested, we can talk about that at another time, but we're very excited about that. I'm putting an ICP on here. As soon as I save an object, it's going to prompt me to save that map. I'm going to hit the little orange thing. I don't even have to do that. And I'm going to say MLPI test map or something like that. And I'm going to share it with everyone in our class, which is MLPI class team account, and you will all be able to see it. So I've started my search. I can now go in and start adding things to my map here. And I just want to kind of talk about the process again. I know you've done it a little bit, but I can right click and add certain objects on here pretty easily, or I can use the new shortcuts, which are labeled up under this add button here. So if I push add, I get down to my SAR objects here. And you can see I have L for line assignment, 1 through 4 for increasingly wide buffer assignments, and A for area assignments. So in this case, I'm just going to hit A on my keyboard. It's going to pop up a nice little thing here. and I'm going to write a terrible assignment and double click it. And I've got an area assignment, but I forgot to put any sort of information in. So I want to spend a little time talking about populating the search assignment fields. So I'm going to edit this first of all. I'm going to go through here, and the first thing I would do is give it a letter assignment, AA, and we'll talk about this a little bit more later, but it sounds like at least Nevada is pretty much on the AAAB train already, which is good. I should have an operational period already, but I don't have that yet. So that was an error on my part. So I'm going to go new operational period. So if I go up here, I can go add operational period, which doesn't have a shortcut. I'll call it OP1. There we go. All right, so back to editing this. Edit. Now, everything that's in this little box here is what shows up on the classic 104 form. So I just want to kind of run through here. I can label this assignment AA. I can put it in operational period 1. I can say it's a type 2 ground assignment. I want 4 people on that search team. I can say this is a high priority assignment. This doesn't show up on the printed assignments, but it lets you, as a search planner, prioritize your highest to lowest classes of assignments. And then PODs for high responsiveness, medium for an unresponsive person, and maybe low for a clue, because we're not, this is kind of a quick area search, let's say. And then here's where you would typically put your details about your assignment, area search, blah, 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 blah. And you would put a nice description that stands alone in here. And I'm going to talk about that again in a few minutes. But the idea is to get away as much as you can from search segment AA, because that doesn't really mean a lot, right? You don't know what the planner was thinking about when they said search segment AA. Sometimes you don't have time to do a lot more, but if you do, the more description you can put in there, the better, because many times the person that writes the plan is not the same person that briefs the team. So you can lose a lot of intent on the way if you don't do a good job here. Previous efforts, none. No hasty's been done in there. You have to self-transport. I'm going to give you 3 hours for this assignment. We don't always use the hours setting, but primary frequency, let's say VTAC 36R repeater, and then VTAC 12 for attack, let's say, prepared by Shelton. There we go. And this is a draft assignment. And I do want to touch on this status box, because I mentioned this once before. You can't probably see all the drop downs, but the other categories are prepared, in progress, and completed. And as I mentioned before, you can use those dynamically during a search to check off areas that are in progress or completed or not started. And then you can actually show all of your assignments on the map by their status, by color. So that can be really handy for briefing management or politicians and people like that. So I'm all done with that. I've built my assignment. And now I can go into bulk operations here and start to manage my assignment. Let's assume I had a bunch of assignments just now written. I'm going to go into bulk ops here, and I'm going to select this assignment. And down here, you'll see there are a bunch of things I can do. I want to talk about them briefly, and then we're going to talk about them in detail in a couple of minutes. But I can print individual maps. We prefer a standardized map package nowadays, so we don't use this so much anymore. I can change attributes, and I'll talk about this at length in a few minutes. And then what I really wanted to focus on here is the 104 assignment form, the 104 summary form, and the 104 deployment form. So the one we're all familiar with in one variation or another is 104 assignment form. So you can see all the info I put in that little box now shows up here. Whatever I named my map becomes the name of the search. The operational period shows up. The assignment is AA. You'll see an asterisk next to the number of people I would like to have on that team. It asks to highlight things like team leader and medical with an L or an M. It has my detailed text of the assignment, previous efforts, time allocated. It automatically calculates the size of an area assignment and inserts it here. Transportation, radio frequencies, and so forth. So that's our classic form. I'm going to talk a lot in a little bit about the new way to do it, which is our summary form, which basically has all that same information, but it's going to be in a much more compact form. And I'll show you how the flow of that works and why we like it so much in a couple of minutes. So that's kind of the mechanics of it. As I get more assignments built in here, I can select them like rows on an Excel spreadsheet, and I can kind of change things around. So I can also change display colors and all that as I build my search plan out. So with that, what I want to do is kind of go back and jump into a real search now, and one that has a fairly comprehensive search plan. And let me get rid of these. And I'm going to jump now into a search plan. So in this particular case, this was a real search we had in Marin. This is actually in Sausalito where we had that case study. But this was a despondent who we found his car at the freeway right where the ICP is. And he left with a knife and said he was doing himself in. And then the car was found like 10 days later by CHP at the end of a dead-ended off-ramp. So we were assigned this. They did a hasty search the night before with a trailing cadaver or a cadaver dog, and had no luck. So we got together and built a plan here. And you can see the idea where we're kind of fanning out with area assignments. You can see it wasn't done great. In fact, it was done before Matt had his cool snap to the polygon next to you feature. So there's some kind of rough polygons here that don't match up very well, and they're a little sloppy. So I would recommend changing those. But the first thing I would do as I'm building this plan out, and I repeat this all the time, is I would change my display settings to something like random, because random lets you see all the segment borders much better. And I've talked about that, but I keep emphasizing that. The other thing you can do is resource type, and it'll show you the difference between dogs and ground assignments, for example. And some of those are superimposed on top of one another with different timing, of course. And then status as well, which I mentioned. And I think these should all have the same status because I haven't sent anyone out yet. So I'm going to leave this on random for right now. And then we're going to talk a little bit about how we can really lever bulk operations to kind of manage this. So the first thing I'm going to do is kind of go through here and just show you what we've got. We've got a few important markers that are in a marker folder. I did put range rings on here. One of the things we recommend if you have your lost person behavior book handy is maybe think about either supplementing it with a 75% range ring or something like that for this particular class of missing person, or or use just the mile ones. But it's always great to add the lost person one just for perspective, I think. And that one is not added on here. I did something a little quirky here because we had such a large dog influence, but OP1 is not really important here. But in OP2, I actually split it into 2 sub OPs, and that was nice because it just makes it really quick to turn canine assignments off or turn ground assignments off and be able to focus easily on one or the other. So that's kind of a tool in the toolbox that you might want to use at times. So now I'm going to scroll down. You can see I have a ton of assignments here. We've got a bunch of mutual aid coming in. It was a big search. And I'm going to go into bulk operations down here at the bottom and click on bulk operations. And it comes up with a nice little spreadsheet view. The first thing that I like to do here is kind of sort them. You can click on the headers up here and it'll sort. So I'm going to click and you can see I've got dog assignments first. And it's kind of vague. What's a dog? Is it a trailing dog, area dog, cadaver dog? I could probably fine tune that better. They're in the right operational period already, so that's good. But then I can go over and look at the size of these area assignments. You can see they range from like 8 or 9 acres up to about 60 acres. So I'm kind of eyeballing those, a couple hour assignments for pretty small teams. And we want pretty good coverage because this person is down. So I like the size of those. They're small, bite-sized, and then a lot of teams will be able to knock out a couple or 3 assignments a day, depending on where they start out. So that's all good. Goodbye inspection. I can kind of sort by priority here and see what's my mix between high priority assignments and low priority assignments. And I've got a pretty good split. If we bang through all the high priority stuff, then we'll send people out on their second and third assignments in the lower priority. So team sizes are in here. That's all good. I put that all in already. But now let's just say we've got some changes in information like our radio channels. So I'm going to go in here and I'm going to select, I'm going to sort this first. I'm gonna do a couple things. One is I want these dogs to be labeled as HRD dogs. So I'm gonna select all of those by using the shift button and clicking at the bottom, kind of like in an Excel sheet. And then I'm gonna go in here and I'm gonna go to this master change thing called change attributes. And that lets me change the 104 forms of all of those selected rows at the same time. So I could double check, make sure everything's, since they're all dog assignments, they're all in the K9 operational period. I'm going to call them all HRD dogs instead of just dogs. The team sizes are all going to be a handler and a flanker. And the thing that's going to change is we're going to say that we're going to use Carta 5 for their tactical channel. And we had the wrong channel in before. We're going to use VTAC 36R repeater. So what this does now is when I hit enter, all of those assignments, all 10 of them or however many I had selected, will have those fields populated with that information. But for the fields where I never touched them, nothing will change. So it lets you, in a really quick way at the end of your planning cycle, put in the final details and have it present. And you can do it, because obviously the ground teams aren't using Carta 5, so I would do a different process for them. So now if I hit update and I go try to find a dog assignment, and let me just see if one of these is a dog assignment. Well, actually, let me just go to the bulk operations again, and I'll print one of the dog assignments. So let me print this one. I will go down here and print a 104 assignment form. So it should have my updated information. I've got to, let's kind of take a quick look at this. Incident name should be geographic. It is. OP2 K9. It's an HRD K9 with 2 people assigned to the assignment. Here's a nice description that should match the maps well. I'm going to go down here and say, we had a hasty trail search, no clues the day before. You have 15 acres to search, high POD, start from the command post, and you can see my radio channels updated automatically there. So that all works great. And that's how you use bulk operations for changing things that are the same in multiple assignments. So it's super fast. So when when I'm running a planning team, I encourage the planners to focus on the segments themselves first, and then focus on the description second, and we'll do all the bookkeeping at the end. And that includes things like assigning assignment names to each segment. And let's talk about that briefly and how that works in here. So I'm going to zoom back out. You can see I've got all my assignments there. I'm going to go down to bulk operations. I'm going to select everything now because I want to put letter assignment numbers or assignment letters on each one. And you can see down here at the bottom, there's a alter sequence button called reletter or renumber. In this case, I want to label all my assignments starting with AA. So I click on that. I go in this box and I type AA and I hit OK. And everything immediately gets populated with a unique identifier that scrolls through the alphabet. So this is the way to do it. I know on some searches, everyone tries to say what letters available next. And then inevitably you end up with 2 ALs or 2 AKs or something. And you end up with confusion if you send them out in the field that way, or you end up having to relabel things at the end. So what I do is I use that all the time. And that way, you got them all right. And then maybe if I'm adding a couple more assignments, I might do those manually at the end. But right now you can see I had 26 assignments, AZ, AA through AZ, and that's all great there. So next thing I'm going to do before I finish up on bulk operations, I want to do one more sort here by type. I'm going to kind of check out things. My assignment areas look good. I'm good to go there. I've got my comms channel set up, my previous efforts, and so forth. And I think I'm ready to print my 104 forms, and just roll with me on this one. But I'm going to go down here and print the 104 summary, which is the new way of doing things, which I will describe in detail in a minute. I'm going to highlight all those. I'm going to say print a 104 summary. And when I print this into a PDF, it'll be nicely formatted. I can call this Rodeo OP2, and I hit print, and it'll give me a nice PDF with all the information that's available for every assignment. And ideally, every team gets all the assignments, either in the IAP or as a standalone document. It has some useful information here, which I'll talk about it in a minute, but it shows you the boundaries of the corners in UTM. It shows you the rough shape, so you can pick it out on a map quickly. And it has all the same information that was on a 104 form originally, except it's in a much more compact form. So there's a big advantage to this, which I'll kind of go through in a moment. So I'm ready to go there, but there's more. There's one more thing that's really handy here. And if you've had the luxury of building a good mutual aid search plan, and you're trying to track your resource needs for the next operational period, you hit this 104 summary for deployment button, and you get another nice report, which I'm going to print just to let it, actually, I'll leave it like this since it's easier to see on the big screen. So essentially what this does is it totals up all the resources that you put into your individual assignments, and it breaks it out by your priority of assignments. So in this case, I want to make sure I get my high priority assignments done in my next operational period with my mutual aid resources. So I can see I really need 4 trailing dog assignments. They may be all day, so I'd want 3 or 4 dogs ideally. And you also want to have dogs available for checking other dogs. So I'm kind of going with 4 teams there. I'm going with 1 type 2 ground team because I've got 1 gnarly assignment. The rest of it's pretty easy, and I'm going to put 4-person teams into each of those areas. So this says I need 36 people, 40, 48 people in my high priority, 44 ground plus handlers plus overhead. And if I think these are all day assignments, which they probably aren't, I'd probably request this much additional resource at the most. And then I would have my resource order ready to go to the state, plus whatever helicopter or whatever other assistance I might need. So I really recommend you take the time when you build your assignments to put the right number of people in the assignments and prioritize them carefully. And then you'll end up with a nice package that gives you a really nice overview of what you'll be doing the next day. Any questions so far? Okay, we will move right along. So I'm done with that now. And what I'm going to do now is kind of switch back to the PowerPoint, I think, hopefully. Oh, the other thing I wanted to show, hang on one second. Let me just. Okay, I'm going to switch back to the PowerPoint now. Skip a couple of slides. All right, and the slides are moving this time, I hope. Excellent. Okay, I think we've got that worked out. So now let's talk about the assignment writing progression in a little bit more detail. I kind of showed you the sequence, but what I do is kind of developed out of our remote planning process. Almost every search, if not every search we do now, is remotely planned. And you can kind of say, well, how can you do that if you don't even know what's going on? You're breaking all your own rules about how to write a search plan. And one of the advantages you have of remote planning is there's no distractions, there's great connectivity, you're sitting at home in a nice quiet room. And we use Zello, the walkie-talkie app, or you can use Zoom in a corner, and you get all your planners together, or a conference call line, and you can really be effective, and you can bang out. There are oftentimes we'll have 50 plans written before the first teams are deployed at the search. So you can really bang out a lot. And so what you really want to do is once you've kind of got a saturation of plan types and the area, you start kind of deleting the ones that don't make sense as information comes in, and you prioritize the ones that do make sense. But the good news is they're already all written. So that's kind of our style now, and it works really well. So the plans chief should really split up the plans writing in any number of ways, but these are the ones I like to use, either by planning region geographically, or by resource type. A lot of times we'll get one of our canine handlers on the call and say, listen, you're the expert. You figure out how best to deploy the canines in this situation. We'll write e-bike assignments separately as well. Sometimes we'll split it up by assignment type. You do all the hasty trail searches, you do the linear features, you do the area searches. So you can kind of pick however you want. You just don't want a lot of ambiguity. Sometimes I'll draw a big cross in the middle of the map and say, you've got the Northwest, you've got the Northeast, and so forth. So just come up with a system. Plans chiefs manages that, oversees it, keeps everybody focused, and get the basic assignments defined in SARTopo. Don't worry about the details initially. Don't put in the assignment letters or any of that. Maybe start with description notes if they're important, like grid search this one really well. We can go back and fill in the assignment description a little bit later, but we want to kind of get the shapes on the map and make sure that makes sense. Include the basic resource types. Are they ground? Are they canines? If you have varied terrain, are they ground 1, ground 2, ground 3? And don't worry too much about priorities, because you may not even have enough intelligence about the missing person yet to prioritize them. But if you do have that information, as plans chief, you would start kind of prioritizing them and bucketing these. So as the teams are assembled, the operations people know which people are going to get sent out first. So once these are roughed out, I like to complete the detailed descriptions, and I'll give you a couple of examples of that in a minute. I like to set the team sizes, detailed resource type, as I mentioned, prioritize the importance once you have enough information to do that. Think a lot about transportation and deployment. Matt's going to spend a lot of time on that, but particularly like for you folks in the mountains, a lot of times you have helicopter deployment involved. So which teams do you really want to get out first? It may not be the most important place to search, but it may be the most important logistical challenge to get a certain set of teams into certain areas. So you may have to send them out first because of helicopter availability. Those kinds of questions you need to think about. And then we ultimately, towards the end, right before teams go out, or you print this all up, you label your assignments AA, AB, AC, and we'll talk about that again in a minute. And then use bulk ops, as I just demoed, to fill in your radio channels and PODs and things like that. So that's kind of the way I like to do it. There's, you don't have to do it exactly this way, but it's kind of evolved into that in our team, and it's worked really well. So let's talk a little bit about thoughtful segment design. And I know this is kind of before we've talked about a lot of Matt's cool concepts about segmentation and such, which he will get into in great detail later. But I just wanted to kind of show you in basic assignment writing, some little tricks and things to think about when you're building assignments. So here's an example, probably maybe even in Nevada County, I can't remember. A Jeep up here parked on a 4-wheel drive road, and no person there, overdue. One way to search this area is to search down to the river in 2 segments here. It's segmented by natural drainages. Does that kind of make sense? Is that a good plan? Well, depending on slope, it could be a really good plan. Otherwise, it maybe isn't a great plan. So how do you kind of look at it? One of the things I do often, as I've showed you before, is dynamically link into Google Earth. And sometimes I spin around and look at what I've created. And I'm like, oh my God, if I drew that and sent people in there, they'd probably all die. That's a really poorly drawn assignment. But that's what you get if you just kind of start with first principles and say, I'm going to separate them by drainages, because it doesn't work in this case. So what am I doing here? I'm going to, I can't search the middle 3/4 of each of those assignments. It doesn't really make any sense. How could I approach this differently? And how can I analyze the problem? So our old friend slope shading, which I get by just hitting the S button now with a new shortcut. I turn on slope angle shading. I'm like, oh my God, this is like 75-degree slope up there. It's really gnarly. No one's going in there. What is it that I really want to accomplish here? If I suspect the guy might have taken a fall in here, I'm not going to search that cliff band. And we're not at the point where we're deploying people on ropes to go down this gigantic search area. So here's how I would kind of look at this, looking at the same set of data. Forget about the drainages for now, although they're high priority areas where he probably would have taken a fall, or most likely could have if he was trying to go down one of them. But I'm going to certainly hammer the top of this area where it's safe to. I'm going to put tons of warnings in my write-up. And then I'm going to go down to the bottom, search the base of the cliffs, send people in with binoculars, and I'm going to try to get a helicopter in there to do everything in between for now, even though we've had very limited success with helicopters finding fall victims on steep slopes. But sometimes they do. I think you do better with binoculars from top and bottom. So how does that one look? It looks a lot safer to me. For starters, there's a good chance if the person took a fall, probably made it all the way to the bottom anyway, or may have, and or at least you can see with binoculars, possibly clothing or or the actual missing person somewhere on those slopes, and it's a much safer operation. So again, and again, I would consider an air search here. So just looking at segments on a map and drawing them in is not a great way to do things. And sometimes I'll really carve up segments into things that look really funny at first glance, but they're made to be accessible and searchable, and not to put your searchers into excessive danger if you don't have to. Okay, so that's one example there. I want to go into another one as well here. This particular one is talking about how you write a good assignment. How many times have you gone on search and seen this? You get a map like the one on the left. It's got a nice rectangle to search. And then the assignment says search area CA on map. And I'm guilty of that many times because it's 3 a.m. when you're writing this plan and you got to get it out. So that's not a good search plan. And as I mentioned earlier, the planner is often not the briefer. I could be asleep now because I was up all night writing plans, and somebody who's just showing up at the search is sending this team out. So I've completely lost my continuity of thought. What was the planner thinking when they wrote this assignment? Is this an important assignment? Well, it said it was a high priority assignment, but I don't know why. And it's just a bad assignment. So how can I make that better in a pretty short period of time? Well, I can choose a better map layer. And in this case, I want to present you with a custom map sheet for this particular assignment because it's important. This is where the person went missing from. It's the last known point. So that's an important thing to have on the map. You can see it wasn't there. There's this house, right? We're looking for, this is like the best place to search. What happened to this guy? Is there signs of foul play? Is there anything going on here? So how can I write this up better? First of all, it's a ground 3 search. It's flat as a pancake. I'm not worried about that. I want 4 people in there. It's only 8 acres, I think, 8 acres. I want to rototill this like shoulder to shoulder. So I want a grid. I use the term grid search or area CA bordered by Sir Francis Drake on the south, barbed wire fences on the other 3 sides. Spacing is critical. Search for anything that looks out of place. Clues may be small as keys. You have permission to search the outbuildings. The deputies hasty searched it last night. Self-transport. I want a high probability on any kind of clue that might be in there. So I've told a completely different story here on the same assignment. And it's really important, especially when you have anything of significance with respect to an assignment, to give as much information as you can. And it doesn't often take a long time to do that, but it makes a big difference in, I'm deploying maybe 30 man hours of searching out there with this assignment. And if I send them out like this, I might have a real crummy outcome. Whereas here, I might come back with a really important clue. So it all comes in the presentation at times. And the more you can give people, the better. Let's talk about sizing a bit. And Matt's going to spend a bunch of time on this, but I just kind of talk about rules of thumb here. But we certainly want to identify ground types in tough terrain, and make sure that your plan section chief or whoever you assign to do this has a good understanding of the terrain in the area, and maybe bring in some local knowledge if you can, and talk about how gnarly some of these drainages are and so forth. And you choose between your type 1s and type 2s and type 3s. And you want to do that early on because, if you're bringing type 1 teams in mutual aid, you probably want to get that out early, like 2 o'clock in the afternoon of the day before the next operational period, so that you can really get the word out and hopefully get some quality type 1 teams in. Our area search teams typically are 2 to 6 people, depending on area, span of control, and so forth. Our drainage teams are usually odd numbered, 1 person kind of down at the bottom, and then either 1 on either side or 2 on either side. Neighborhood search teams, either for fire or for dementia or missing children, will tend to do 2 to 5. If it's a real hasty, maybe a driver and a spotter. If it's a sketch neighborhood, as Mike talked about, you want to have law enforcement assigned to each one of these teams. That's what we did on our dementia search yesterday, even though it was in a very nice neighborhood, but that the police department insisted. So we had one LE with each 2 to 4 person team, and they rode around with them. If you don't have that, keep 1 person at the curb as a spotter. If something goes wrong, they've got a radio and they can call it in quickly. So think about those things when you decide how many people you want to spec out for each team. Most of our K9 teams are 1 handler, 1 flanker. Some handlers like to have 2 flankers, and we can accommodate that with special requests. So if I'm banging out plans the night before search, I'll kind of look at each one, and I'll, if I'm a big open area, and I'm going to give them 100 acres and spend the whole day out there because it's far away. I might give them 6 or 7 people and say, you guys have the ability to spread out and you can knock this whole thing out in a day. So just think about those kinds of things. My bulk operation examples, I've already kind of talked about previous efforts and so forth, how to put those all in there. And then when you're all done fine tuning your plan, I go over it one more time. Type 1, type 2, type 3 ground searchers, canine types, team sizes, priorities. By now, I've probably got some information and intelligence on the search about the missing person, so I can start to prioritize assignments for operations. Operations is free to change their mind, but they're going to rely heavily on plans early on because we've been the ones thinking about this all this time. And then I'm going to do my head count via the 104 summary deployment. And if I'm going mutual aid, I'm going to get that into Cal OES ASAP early in the planning cycle, which we will talk extensively about later. And then let's talk about creating maps. And this is something Matt and I in particular have been big fans of, and that's trying to standardize assignment map packs. So in the old days, you would get a 104 form, and then you would get a map of your assignment there. And then you might get an overview map of the whole search, and then you get sent out with your 3 pieces of paper. We're trying to get to the point, and I think we've made it, where in most cases, everything's in an IAP. So the IAP contains the 104 summary forms, which I'm going to show you again in a second. It contains a standardized map pack that would allow you to be sent to any of those search segments within the assignment, unless there's a really odd exception, like that one where I had the satellite image a couple minutes ago. And when I'm all done, I want to create a big briefing map and so forth. So with that, I do want to show you the process for creating a map pack if you want to do it that way. I'm going to shift back briefly to the other screen and talk about printing this. And a map pack is a little different. I do use them sometimes, but sometimes I'll just make a set of maps one by one. So if I go to the print module by clicking on the little printer man, it's going to bring up the print module in here. And there's my nice overview map right up front. It's kind of formatted nicely already. Probably shrink it down some so it's got a little more detail on it. And don't have to get every little inch on it, but that might be my overview map, which is fine. I could print it just like that. It would have a nice barcode on it and render it as an 8.5 by 11. And that could be one of the maps in the IAP because it does give you a nice overview. Alternatively, I can use this as a starting point for a pack of maps that's generated all at once. So the way I do that is I go over here, I can put a title in, I can call it Rodeo OP2, and that will show up on there. I might add UTMs to my maps, lat long ticks if I want. They're kind of innocuous. I'll leave the maps up for 7 days. I'm not going to use bigger icons. I only use those if I'm printing giant like fire maps or big briefing maps where I want all the symbols to be gigantic. So you can experiment with that, but it's only used on larger maps. But what a lot of people don't know about is this add a page function down here. So if I click that, it comes up with a new box, with a new bounding box that I can work on independently. So in this case, my map number 2, I'm going to make it a landscape map. And I just want to show you how it works. But I can basically go in here now and I can draw this, let's say over the southern assignments. And I can go, something, or the central assignments. Let's just say it's a zoom of the central assignments. And then I could build another one that's maybe the outlier assignments on the north and another one for the outlier assignments on the south. And when I hit generate, it'll pop open a new page. And while it's generating, I'll talk about this some more. But essentially, you can build a pack of 3 or 4 maps that way, and they all get rendered at once. And then the top map becomes an index automatically. I do use this sometimes. A lot of times, I just make them individually, so they're not an official set. But the choice is yours. The advantage of printing them individually is that each one will have its own QR barcode that can be scanned into another phone or can be used to bring up that map again on a desktop to be printed again if you want. And it's still rendering here, but I do want to let that finish so I can show you that. Any questions while we're waiting a minute here? One other feature I want to show you while we're still waiting for it to render is over here, you'll see another thing that's called load from. I just want to mention this briefly so that you're aware of it. It can be a real time saver. Let's say that you're printing some big map that you spent a lot of time on laying it out just right. And then the search manager comes back and says, no, I'd rather have Forest Service topo or something on that map. And you're like, oh crap, it took me 20 minutes to build that. So the trick is you take the map name, let's say it was that one, and I can click on that and it'll bring up all the formatting of the map that I printed previously. But then I can go in up here on the right-hand side and change the map layer that I'm rendering it with. So it's just a handy tool if you want to go back and make new maps, but have all the boundaries set by something that you spent time on before. Nice little trick. So here's my map pack. You can see at the top, it has an index page, and then it has bounding boxes to show what's inside that. So there's my overview map of my whole search that goes in the IAP. I can read all the assignments. I can tell they extend out a little bit, but I'm not worried about that because there'll be another map to cover that. And then here's my kind of zoom in to the central area map. And I can just take these 3 pages and include them in my full package of maps. So pretty handy, numerous ways to skin the cat there, but standardization is key. It makes duplication and publishing of an IAP super easy that way. And then you don't have to have, like we used to, 35 different packages where each package has a different map in it and so forth. Standardization saves time, and it also improves situational awareness and the ability to reassign resources without having to give them new information. It's all there already. So I'm going to switch back real quickly here to the PowerPoint. And we've now done all that stuff. We've created our map packs. We've created some large briefing maps. And I do want to mention all the stuff going into the IAP, and we'll talk about that a little later, a later class when we're talking about the IAP builder and how to package everything up nicely inside the IAP. And then you're all good to go at this point. We stack them up by priority, highlight them. And I do want to talk about the difference between the old way of doing this and the new way. So the old way, obviously, for most of us, was a handwritten 104 4-part NCR form. And we would actually handwrite our assignments out there and staple a map to it. And that was only maybe 5 or 6 years ago. We did it that way. Then when SARTopo got traction and the ability to print 104s, we're like, that's great. But the problem is printing, right? When you print a 104, it's just on a single piece of paper. You can't write the names on there because it won't go through. It's not carbon paper. So how do I get my copy for plans and my copy for ops and my copy for, what did I miss? Comms, ops, plans, and the team leader. So the quick fix for that was to buy NCR photocopy paper that you had to put in upside down and backwards. And I think Nevada County, if I remember right, actually built a trailer with a dedicated printer to spit those 4-part forms out, which was a really good solution. I think, or was it El Dorado? I can't remember. But anyway, that was one way to do it. And we definitely did that too. So we would feed the special paper in. I would usually do it at home or something, because if anyone else sent a job to the printer, it would blow up your sequence and you would be jammed. So we're like, that doesn't work so well. And writing your name 4 times on 4 different white sheets of paper is really bad workflow. And running to the copier and copying it 3 times doesn't work. So Matt and I really beat it around for a long time about how to make the process better in this new electronic age. So old way turns into the new way. About 3 or 4 years ago, we kind of iterated our way through this. And so the idea is that within the IAP or within a standalone assignment package, you would take the 104 summary and you would say, hey, I want you to do team 202 is going to do this assignment first. I'm going to print this 104 summary on plain paper, which is nice. I don't have to worry about duplication or 4-part forms and all that. It can go straight in the IAP. There's no printing issues. And then I go to my box of blank 104 summary forms, and we'll give you guys the PDF for this. I give it out at every class, and you can make them in your county print shop, or for a couple $100, you can have 1,000 or 2 printed online pretty easily. And you get the 4-part form with carbon paper. And this replaces the 104 form, the combination of these 2 things. But the big advantage is situational awareness. If you're dropped off on a helicopter in the middle of the backcountry and you finished your assignment in the old method, how do I get you a new assignment? And how you don't have a map for the new assignment. You don't know what the assignment is. And it's a real problem. In the new way, I'll say, hey, you've already got the assignment pack. I want you to go to segment AK, read the instructions for it and search it, and we're redeploying you there. So you already have all the information you need to do any assignment that's been written for that day. So we like this process much better. So as part of this process, we wrestled around for quite a while with team numbers versus assignment letters. And almost every class, someone asked about this. And I was started from very, very sure that team numbers were the right way to do it. And it took me a while to figure out why I felt so strongly. And that's because it's easy. I have a team number, 101. I have an assignment segment that's 101. I look at the map, I see 101. When team 101 calls in, I know where they are. They're in 101. So what's wrong with that? So it's great where reassignment is easy and there's not a risk of confusion. And if you think about the searches that we have in Marin, we're not riding around in helicopters and things. It's pretty easy to come back to the command post and say, okay, you guys eat a sandwich. When you're done debriefing, I'm going to send you out on a new assignment. And I pull out one out of the stack and I'm going to say, now you're going to be team 103. And I fill out the new 4-part form 104 and I send you back out. So it's all clean. So Matt came in from the other side saying we should have assignments different than team numbers. They should start with AA or whatever, and they are independent of team number. I'm like, well, why do you do that? He goes, well, because reassignment is easier and it's less confusing as long as you're diligent about how you keep track of things. And that's the important stuff. And I'm going to talk about that on the next slide. But what we have agreed on, and it's in the best practices document that's circulated, and I think Nevada anyway does this already more or less, is that we start with an alpha designator on each assignment. Those are retained for the duration of the search. We don't reuse those alpha labels. We can go to BA and CA and DA if we want to build the assignments out. We update the SARTopo assignments with team numbers as needed. And then we can use bulk ops, again, as I demonstrated already, to rapidly letter or rapidly number your assignments. So what does that all mean? Let's take an example here. Here's that search I just showed you guys that we did the bulk ops on. You can see I've already labeled them all AA, AB, AC, AD. We're all ready to go. Teams are showing up and got my IAP here, and we're going to start making assignments. So as operations chief, what I'm going to do is I'm going to have my little metal clipboard out there, slap one of these plans assignment lists on there. Whoever's helping me is going to work with me, and I'm going to keep track of what assignment team number is going to be assigned to which segment letter. And so it's pretty easy at the beginning. I'll just do my highest priority, AA, AB, AC, AD. I might add little notes in here like one's canine or ground or whatever I want, but this is my little cheat sheet for keeping track of who I have deployed where. So in this case, our best practice, which we recommend, is that the operational period is the first number, and then team numbers start at 1 and go up to whatever for that day. Next day would be 201, 202. Makes it really easy if you're on day 5 to know that team 305 was 2 days ago, that sort of thing. So I like that system. You don't have to use it, but it's a best practice. But most important thing is you got to record the stuff. And if you don't do it carefully, you're going to lose track of your teams in the field real quickly. So how does that translate? So in this case, I'm making sure that the resource folks are on top of this. So as operations chief, I'm making sure plans and the SARTopo people and the T-card folks, that we have a communication loop going, and that as I identify and send these teams out, that information gets quickly passed to comms, quickly passed to the T-card folks, and quickly put on SARTopo, where hopefully everyone could see it if they have a laptop nearby. So in this case, I've sent my teams out. I've gone into SARTopo, put 101, 102, 103, 104 against the segments that they'll be searching. And now team 101 has completed their assignment in segment AA, and I want to redeploy them. So I'm going to take my little sheet out here and I'm going to write 106 101 is going to also get an AK. I'll put AA, AK because they finished, and I'm going to reassign them. So I go into SARTopo. I make sure that I put 101 into segment AK. They're going to do AL as well, and they've already done AA. So it should be pretty clear to everyone where they are and at this time. And if there's some confusion about what the sequence was, you can check with the ops chief or the T-card folks or whatever, and keep track of it that way. But this way, anyone who has access to either the mobile app, the searchers out in the field and Team 101, they're going to see their number right on the segment out there. So they know they're in the right place in real time. So this is a good system. It works really, really well. We've been super happy with it. So just the key is that someone has to be super responsible for keeping this updated, or the thing goes off the rails pretty quickly. So what does my package look like? And this is what I'd like ideally to put into the IAP package. But my assignment package is going to have one of these forms, maybe with a highlighted first assignment. It's going to have the map package, whatever that looks like. And then I'm going to be filling out one of these by hand, which is easy. So all my photocopying, there's no photocopying issues. There's no printing issues. Everything's super clean. And I'm going to have my 4 copies here as ops. When I'm sending the team out, I write everything down. I've carefully documented the leader's cell, which should be on the T card too. I've documented the team leader. I've documented the medical person on there. And I'm going to try to make sure I spread those people around properly. We're going to talk about that later too. And I might put a couple little other pieces of information just to keep everyone in the loop. It's a type 2 team, ground team. They're starting out in segment AA and they're team number 101. Then I reassign them to AK, and then later I reassign them to AL as well. So all of that's good stuff. It's all packaged up and ready to go. Final steps, as I mentioned, large briefing map. Those are kind of going away because we have big monitors now. We actually got one of those big daylight outdoor monitors, which is fantastic. It's kind of unwieldy, but it's way better than printing a 36-inch or 48-inch map because you can move it around and zoom and everything. So that is our briefing package now, pretty much. Our plotters are probably getting retired soon. We didn't even, our new command vehicle doesn't even have a plotter in it, actually. Another thing we like to do is print specialized maps. Matt's going to spend some time on this, aerials, landing zone maps, other things like that. The aerials are often useful for helicopter pilots and so forth. Sometimes we'll set up and export assignments into old school Garmin GPS units and then offer Avenza barcodes that people can scan or SARTopo QR codes to get in, and then make sure that's all ready to go, and then package up my IAP, which is going to be a topic of a later class. And then you get on with it. So that's what I wanted to cover on this segment. Are there any questions?
Rich, we do have a few questions.
Okay.
Alan says, would you go from draft to prepared in options?
Yeah, so I normally leave it as draft until I go in progress usually. You could switch to prepared, but what I like to do is that if you have someone adept at using SARTopo, which is always a good thing, and maybe that person who's putting the team numbers onto the map as they're being sent out in the field, I would love that person to go. Let me switch back to SARTopo real quick. I would love to have that same person when they're typing in the assignment number. Let's go here. Okay, let's go to AA. I know I just gave that assignment to team 101. So I'm going to go 101 in the number box. And I can also, if I go back and search that segment a later day, there's no reason I can't say 201 also searched it the next day. So I can do that too. But I don't have to change my segments if I don't want to. And then down here, I might go straight from draft to in progress. And so now when I go down to my bulk operations and say display settings, I can say show by status. And I have one search, wherever it is, this guy, I guess. This search, one segment is in progress now. And then as it's done, I'll change its status to complete. Other questions, Michael? Or?
I was